My Method by Emil Coué. This audio is brought to you by You Are Creators, Inc. and is free to use and download. Chapter 1. I wish to say how glad I was to come into personal contact with the great American public on their own side of the Atlantic. And at the same time, I could not help feeling just a little embarrassed. I had an idea that people on that continent expected from me some wonderful revelation, bordering on the miraculous, whereas, in reality, the message I have to give is so simple that many are tempted at first to consider it almost insignificant. Let me say right here, however, that simple as my message may be, it will teach those who consent to hear it and to give it fair thought a key to permanent physical and moral well-being which can never be lost. Autosuggestion is disconcerting in its simplicity. To the uninitiated, autosuggestion or self-mastery is likely to appear disconcerting in its simplicity. But does not every discovery, every invention seem simple and ordinary once it has become vulgarized and the details or mechanism of it known to the man in the street? Not that I'm claiming autosuggestion as my discovery. Far from it. Autosuggestion is as old as the hills. Only we had forgotten to practice it. And so we needed to learn it all over again. Think of all the forces of the universe ready to serve us. Yet centuries elapsed before man penetrated their secret and discovered the means of utilizing them. It is the same in the domain of thought and mind. We have at our service forces of transcendent value of which we are either completely ignorant or else only vaguely conscious. Power of autosuggestion known in the Middle Ages. The power of thought, of idea, is incommensurable, is immeasurable. The world is dominated by thought. The human being individually is also entirely governed by his own thoughts, good or bad. The powerful action of the mind over the body, which explains the effects of suggestion, was well known to the great thinkers of the Middle Ages, whose vigorous intelligence embraced the sum of human knowledge. Every idea conceived by the mind, says St. Thomas, is an order which the organism obeys. It can also, he adds, engender a disease or cure it. The efficaciousness of autosuggestion could not be more plainly stated. Pythagoras and Aristotle taught autosuggestion. We know, indeed, that the whole human organism is governed by the nervous system, the center of which is the brain, the seat of thought. In other words, the brain, or mind, controls every cell, every organ, and every function of the body. That being so, is it not clear that by means of thought, we are the absolute masters of our physical organism, and that, as the ancients showed centuries ago, thought, or suggestion, can and does produce disease or cure it? Pythagoras taught the principles of autosuggestion to his disciples. He wrote, God the Father, deliver them from their sufferings and show them what supernatural power is at their call. Even more definite is the doctrine of Aristotle, which taught that a vivid imagination compels the body to obey it, for it is a natural principle of movement. Imagination, indeed, governs all the forces of sensibility, while the latter, in its turn, controls the beating of the heart, and through it sets in motion all vital functions. Thus, the entire organism may be rapidly modified. Nevertheless, however vivid the imagination, it cannot change the form of a hand or foot or other member. I have a particular satisfaction in recalling this element of Aristotle's teaching, because it contains two of the most important, nay, essential principles of my own method of autosuggestion. 1. The dominating role of the imagination. 2. The results to be expected from the practice of autosuggestion must necessarily be limited to those coming within the bounds of physical possibility. I shall deal with these essential points in greater detail in another chapter. Unfortunately, all these great truths, handed down from antiquity, have been transmitted in a cloudy garb of abstract notions, or shrouded in the mystery of esoteric secrecy, and thus have appeared inaccessible to the ordinary mortal. If I have had the privilege of discerning the hidden meaning of the old philosophers, or extracting the essence of a vital principle, and of formulating it in a manner extremely simple and comprehensible to modern humanity, I have also had the joy of seeing it practiced with success by thousands of sufferers for more than a score of years. Slaves of suggestion and masters of ourselves. Mark well, I am no healer. I can only teach others to cure themselves and to maintain perfect health. I hope to show, moreover, that the domain of application of autosuggestion is practically unlimited. Not only are we able to control and modify our physical functions, but we can develop in any desired direction our moral and mental faculties merely by the proper exercise of suggestion. In the field of education, there is vast scope for suggestion. From our birth to our death, we are all the slaves of suggestion. Our destinies are decided by suggestion. It is an all-powerful tyrant of which, unless we take heed, we are the blind instruments. Now, it is in our power to turn the tables and to discipline suggestion and direct it in the way we ourselves wish. Then it becomes autosuggestion. We have taken the reins into our own hands and have become masters of the most marvelous instrument conceivable. Nothing is impossible to us except, of course, that which is contrary to the laws of nature and the universe. How are we to attain this command? We must first thoroughly grasp at least the elements of the mechanism of the mental portion of what constitutes the human being. The mental personality is composed of the conscious and the subconscious. It is generally believed that the power and acts of a man depend almost exclusively upon his conscious self. It is beginning to be understood, however, that compared with the immensity of the role of the subconscious, that of the conscious self is as a little islet in a vast ocean, subject to storm and tempest. Dominance of the subconscious is over the conscious. The subconscious is a permanent, ultra-sensitive, photographic plate which nothing escapes. It registers all things, all thoughts, from the most insignificant to the most sublime. But it is more than that. It is the source of creation and inspiration. It is the mysterious power that germinates ideas and effects their materialization in the conscious form of action. If we agree that the point of departure of our joys, our sorrows, our ills, our well-being, our aspirations, of all our emotions is in our subconscious self, then we may logically deduct that every idea germinated in our mind has a tendency to realization. Hundreds of examples drawn from little incidents of everyday existence enable us to verify the truth of all of this. To illustrate action of thoughts on the emotive faculties we have, but to remember any grave accident or harrowing spectacle of which we have been a witness immediately to feel the sensations of pain or horror with greater or less intensity according to our individual temperament. Imagine you are sucking a lemon. A simpler and perhaps even more striking example is the classic one of the lemon. Imagine that you are sucking a juicy, sour lemon and your mouth will inevitably and instantaneously begin to water. What has happened? Simply this. Under the influence of the idea, the glands have gone to work and secreted an abundant quantity of saliva, almost as much, in fact, as if you had actually taken a bite of a real lemon. Again, just think of a scratching pencil being drawn perpendicularly over a slate, and you cannot avoid shuddering and screwing up your face under the shock, while contracted nerves send a shiver from the back of your head all down your spine. Impossible to separate the physical from the mental. We must therefore realize that it is impossible to separate the physical from the mental, the body from the mind, that they are dependent upon each other, that they are really one. The mental element, however, is always dominant. Our physical organism is governed by it, so that we actually make or mar our own health and destinies according to the ideas at work in our subconscious. I mean by this that we are absolutely free to implant whatever ideas we desire in our subconscious self, which is a never-flagging recorder. And those ideas determine the whole trend of our material, mental, and moral being. It is just as easy to whisper into our receptive subconscious self the idea of health as it is to moan over our troubles. And those who do may be certain of the result, because, as I hope I have convinced them, it is based on nature's laws. Chapter 2. The Role of the Imagination. Before beginning to explain the practical application of autosuggestion and the extremely simple method by which it is possible for everyone to gain complete mastery over his or her physical organism, I must speak of the all-important role of the imagination. Dominance of the imagination over the will. Contrary to the generally accepted theory, the will is not the invincible force it is claimed to be. In fact, whenever imagination and will come into conflict, it is always imagination that triumphs. Try to do something while you are repeating, "I cannot do it," and you will see this truth confirmed. The mere idea of inability to accomplish a thing paralyzes the willpower. Self-mastery is attained when the imagination has been directed and trained to conform with our desires, for although in one sense the imagination is inclined in the subconscious, yet it dominates the latter. And therefore, if we know how to guide it, our subconscious self will take charge of our material being and do its work just as we wish it to be done. Or, in other words, exactly in conformity with our conscious suggestions. I cannot too strongly insist that in the practice of autosuggestion, the exercise of will must be strictly avoided, except in the initial phase of directing or guiding the imagination on the desired lines. This is absolutely the only manifestation of will necessary, or even desirable. Any other voluntary effort is positively harmful in connection with autosuggestion, and will almost certainly have an effect contrary to the one desired. Analyze the so-called strong-willed characters of history, Caesar, Napoleon, etc. You will find that they were all men of big imagination. Certain ideas were implanted in their minds, and their tenacious suggestions impelled them into action. This, however, is a digression. Law of converted effort. What I want to drive home for the moment is the law of what my friend Charles Baudouin calls converted effort. Suppose a man suffering from insomnia decides to try the effect of autosuggestion. Unless previously warned, he will repeat to himself phrases like this: I want to sleep. I will sleep. I am going to sleep. And all the time, he will be making desperate efforts to coax sleep. That is fatal. The very fact of exerting effort has converted the latter into a force acting in a sense contrary to the original suggestion, with the result that the poor man tosses and turns in his bed in sleepless wretchedness. The imagination should be unhindered. Let the imagination do its work alone, unhindered, be quite passive. Through mysterious, still unexplained processes, our subconscious self-accomplishes marvelous things. Think of the very commonest movements of the human body and ask yourselves how they are operated. What has set in motion the complicated mechanism when you stretch your arm to reach a glass on a table or when you take a cigarette from your case? No one knows. But if we cannot explain the phenomenon, we do not know that in actual fact, it is an order resulting from a mere suggestion which is transmitted through the nervous system and translated into action at a speed infinitely greater than that of lightning. Examples of the power of the imagination. Thousands of examples of the power of imagination may be found in everyday life. There is the one given by Pascal, and so often cited, which I cannot help repeating here, because it is such a perfect illustration. No one would have the slightest difficulty in walking along a foot-wide plank placed on the ground. But put the same plank across a street at the height of one of your American skyscrapers. Blondel himself would not have dared trust himself on it. Anyone who did would assuredly fall to death. No clearer proof of the power of an idea could be desired. There is, however, another striking example in the impunity with which sleepwalkers perform the most perilous feats, such as wandering about on a roof, hugging the extreme edge of it, to the terror of their friends who may happen to perceive them. If awakened suddenly, a sleepwalker in such a position would inevitably fall. Here is another. Dr. Pinot, in his book De la philosophie et de la longévité, relates that in the middle of a large dinner party, the cook rushed in to announce that she had made a mistake and mixed arsenic with the food instead of some other ingredient. Several persons were immediately seized with pains and sickness, which only ceased when the cook came back to say that it was a false alarm. There had been no such dreadful error. I have said enough to prove the irresistible influence of the idea or imagination over the physical organism. It determines pain, movement, emotions, and sensations. Its effect is both moral and physical. We may logically conclude, therefore, that human ailments, which are nothing but disturbances of the natural equilibrium of all the elements of our being, can be cured by the right kind of idea or suggestion. The moral factor in all disease. To begin with, there is in every disease of no matter what nature a moral factor which no doctor can afford to ignore. Some medical authorities in France estimate this moral factor as representing from 40 to 50% of the chances of recovery. A patient who says to himself, "I am getting better," vastly increases his vital forces and hastens his recovery. By gently putting our imagination on the right track, we are sure of aiding nature, who manifests herself through the medium of our subconscious self. The instinct of self-preservation is but a manifestation of nature. At the first sound of alarm, she hastens to the rescue. A cut finger or other wound is followed by a rush of red globules to the injured part. That wonderful subconscious self of ours does it. For it knows and commands every movement of our being, every contraction of our heart, the minutest vibration of every cell in our organism. It is the sublime instrument which we are so apt to misuse by allowing bad, disturbing, or discouraging thoughts to interfere with its work, instead of allowing it to function smoothly and harmoniously. Miracles are attributed to the fakirs of India. Legend or fact, I know not, but it is certainly true that they do some most wonderful things simply because they are taught from their infancy to know, and make use of the limitless, unseen, and yet unexplained forces latent in us, which can be awakened by thought. The limitations of autosuggestion are unknown. I am often asked, what are the limitations of autosuggestion? I reply, I really do not know. The cures I have seen have appeared sometimes so amazing, so incredible, that I decline theoretically to place any limit at all. Although, of course, I must insist, nothing must be expected from autosuggestion which is obviously outside the domain of material possibilities. For instance, it would be absurd to ask for the growth of a new arm or a new leg, despite the fact that the lobster seems to know how to grow a new claw when it is necessary. There are persons who, by long practice and concentration, have acquired an amazing power over their bodily functions. Cases are known to the medical faculty of Paris of men able to increase at will the speed of their heartbeats from 90 to 120, or diminish it to such a degree that the heart seems almost to stop. In another chapter, I shall talk of the diseases actually cured by autosuggestion, and in general of its sphere of curative possibilities. Let it be thoroughly realized that thought, or suggestion, is able to mold the human body as a sculptor chisels his clay. Thought is an act. It is more than Burnham believed when he wrote, "Suggestion is an idea which can be transformed into action." Certain it is that cases declared to be incurable have been cured by autosuggestion, and not only diseases of a functional nature. Sores and wounds of long standing which had resisted all other treatments have been healed rapidly by suggestion. Was it not Dr. Carnot who said, "The wounds of victorious soldiers heal more rapidly than those of the vanquished"? I can declare without hesitation that whatever the illness, the practice of rational autosuggestion will always effect an appreciable improvement in the patient's condition, even if the disease itself be incurable. Chapter 3. Autosuggestion in Practice. After the preceding explanations of the theory of autosuggestion, my readers are certainly anxious to be initiated in the method of putting it into actual practice. We have seen that our physical organism is completely dominated by our subconscious self, which, obeying every suggestion of no matter what nature, transmits it as an order to every fiber of the body, and that the latter responds or reacts immediately. The only obstacle to the perfect accomplishment of the operation is the intervention of the conscious will or reason at the same time. What we want to know, therefore, is the mechanisms by which we may acquire control of our subconscious self. In other words, achieve self-mastery. Simplicity of controlling the subconscious. The method is simplicity itself, so simple that it has been scoffed at, as all simple solutions of seemingly complicated problems have been scoffed at. But its logic is irrefutable, and its effects are demonstrated every day of our lives. All that is necessary is to place oneself in a condition of mental passiveness, silence the voice of conscious analysis, and then deposit in the ever-awake subconscious the idea or suggestion which one desires to be realized. Every night, when you have comfortably settled yourself in bed and are on the point of dropping off to sleep, murmur in a low but clear voice, just loud enough to be heard by yourself, this little formula. Every day, in every way, I am getting better and better. Recite the phrase like a litany, 20 times or more, and in order to avoid distracting your attention by the effort of counting, it is an excellent idea to tick the number off on a piece of string tied in 20 knots. Puerile. Perhaps. Yet it suffices to set in motion in the desired direction the stupendous forces of which we may be masters if we will. It is a mere suggestion, but that suggestion cast into the mysterious laboratory of the subconscious self is instantaneously translated into an active, living force. Like the oracles of the ancients well knew the power, often the terrible power, contained in the repetition of a phrase or a formula. The secret of the undeniable influence they exercised through the old oracles resided probably, nay, certainly, in the force of suggestion. Yes, my method of self-cure by autosuggestion is undoubtedly simple. It is easy to understand and just as easy to practice. Yet the human mind is today what it was in the days of the oracles. It insists on associating the healing of the body or mind with complicated theories and processes which, in reality, is quite unnecessary. Why complain if things are made easy for you? People may wonder why I am content to prescribe such a general and apparently vague formula as every day, in every way, I am getting better and better for all and every ailment. The reason is, strange as it may seem, that our subconscious mind does not need the details. The general suggestion that everything in every way is going well is quite sufficient to set up the procedure of persuasion which will carry its effects to the different organs and improve every function. I have had remarkable demonstration of this in the course of my long teaching and experiments. Time and again, I have seen patients cured, not only of the particular disease for which they sought relief, but also of minor disabilities which they had almost forgotten. Why a general suggestion is better than specific suggestions. The fact is, our subconscious knows much more than we can ever know ourselves about our physical organism. Fortunately for us, just think what a mess we should make of things if we had to look after every function, breathing, digestion, for instance. Who is it that takes charge of such a complicated job? The subconscious mind. And if it ever does its work badly, it is always because, in some way or another, we have voluntarily meddled with it. Every organ or function is connected with and depends in some degree upon others. And if the ordinary man or woman were to begin ordering the subconscious tinkering with a particular organ, he or she would certainly be obeyed. Only the chances are that something else would then go wrong as a result of insufficient knowledge or perhaps complete ignorance of physiology on the part of the conscious mind. Don't concentrate, so just leave it to the subconscious. Avoid all effort. When you recite your phrase, every day, in every way, I am getting better and better, you must relax all strain and tension. Do not seek to concentrate your thoughts. Concentration is very valuable and necessary when conscious reasoning is to be done, but fatal to the success of autosuggestion. Isolate yourself from everything likely to distract your attention, however. Close your eyes if possible. You can obtain mental isolation in a crowd, in a streetcar, if need be, and there is no reason why you should not practice autosuggestion in such conditions in the daytime, always providing you succeed in putting yourself in the right state of passiveness. At the risk of being accused of tedious repetition, I must insist on the necessity of passiveness and inertia. Do not think you must struggle to impose your suggestion. The very fact of making it an effort will bring into play the conscious will, and that will actually raises a barrier between the subconscious and the suggestion and prevents the latter from penetrating. Now, from what I have said of the superiority of a general formula of autosuggestion, it must not be thought that I altogether discourage the application of suggestion to specific complaints. On the contrary, it is to be recommended unreservedly in all cases where it is desired to relieve pain, correct functional disorders, or alleviate their symptoms. How to banish pain. For such purposes, here is my procedure. To cause pain to vanish, rub the affected spot lightly, but rapidly with your hand, at the same time repeating in an undertone, so swiftly as to make of it a mere gabble the words, "Ça passe." In a few minutes, the pain should disappear, or at the very least, be considerably diminished. The reason for gabbling the words is to avoid the risk of any other extraneous or contrary thought slipping in through fissures, which might result from a more distinct but slower diction. For the same reason, I advise English-speaking people to stick to the French version, it being much easier to say "ça passe" quickly than the longer and more awkward expression, "it is passing" or "it is going." How to go to sleep. Sufferers from sleeplessness will proceed in another way. Having settled themselves comfortably in bed, they will repeat, not gabble, "I am going to sleep. I am going to sleep," in a quiet, placid, even voice, avoiding, of course, the slightest mental effort to attain the desired result. The soporific effect of this droning repetition of the suggestion soon makes itself felt. Whereas, if one actually tries to sleep, the spirit of wakefulness is kept alive by the negative idea, according to the law of converted effort. Insomnia, indeed, affords a striking demonstration of the disastrous effect of the exertion of the will, the result of which is just the contrary to the one desired. Stammering, lack of confidence, and paralysis cured. Stammering, again, is a painful affliction which readily yields to autosuggestion. I have known cases of cures being effected in one sitting, though this, naturally, is rare. What is the cause of stammering? Merely the fear or the idea that one is going to stammer. If you can substitute for that idea the conviction or the suggestion that you are not going to stutter, that if you can say 10 words without stuttering, there is no reason why you should stumble over the 11th, then you are cured. Nervousness, timidity, lack of confidence, and still worse, nervous phenomena can be eradicated by the practice of autosuggestion, for they are simply the consequences of self-suggestion of a wrong, unnatural character. Those who suffer from such infirmities must set up a different train of suggestions by saying, "I am not nervous. I am well and full of confidence. All is going well." In a fit of anger, try the effect of suddenly murmuring, "I am calm," and you will be surprised. There are quite a number of cases of paralysis which are due only to the patient's belief in his or her inability to use the affected limb or member. They can all be cured easily, certainly. Implant the notion, I can walk, I can move my arm or leg or finger, and the cure is accomplished. Why? Because although the lesion which originally produced the paralysis has healed already, the patient has lost the habit of using his limb and still thinks he is unable to do so. It is obvious that, strong as that subconscious notion may be in its effects, those of a contrary notion must be equally strong if only the suggestion can be conveyed to the subconscious mind. That is the whole secret. Chapter 4. Diseases that can be cured. Let us now talk a little about specific diseases which can be cured by autosuggestion. I must repeat what I have said in a previous chapter, that it is very difficult to place any limit to the powers of autosuggestion, within the bounds of possibility, of course. For even in cases of maladies described as incurable, I have had occasion to observe such extraordinary improvement effected in the patient's condition that the most extravagant hopes would seem justified. Organic diseases can be influenced. It can be affirmed without hesitation that even organic disorders come within the influence of autosuggestion. I am aware that this contradicts the theory of a number of doctors who, perhaps, judge the matter rather too hastily. But my affirmation is supported by many other eminent members of the fraternity in France and elsewhere who have found its truth demonstrated by actual facts. Dr. Vacher, professor of the School of Psychotherapeutics at Paris, and a distinguished member of the growing corps of physicians who have begun to employ autosuggestion and suggestion as an adjunct to the ordinary resources of medicine, cited recently the case of a young woman cured of ulcers in the stomach by the new method. There was no diagnostic error. X-ray photographs had been taken. A surgical operation had been prescribed. By means of suggestion, unaided by drugs or other treatment, the patient was cured within 2 months. In the first week, the vomiting had ceased. The same practitioner mentions the rapid disappearance of a tumor on the 10th rib, the sufferer being a young girl who was also afflicted with a fissure of the anus. The girl had been ill for 2 years and in bed for 3 months. Her temperature was high and her general condition bad. The power of suggestion cured her in a fortnight, the tumor disappearing completely and the fissure healing without leaving a trace. Showing how symptoms may be cured even when the disease itself may not. In the course of my own experience, one of the most remarkable cases which I can call to mind is that of a boy who, if not actually cured of a serious heart affection, endocarditis, at least got rid of all the symptoms, and lives and enjoys life as though in perfect health. One day the door of my study was opened, and a pale, thin youth entered, leaning heavily on the arm of his father. At every step he paused, and every breath he took was like the painful gasp of an exhausted animal. Poor little chap. I did not expect to be able to do much for him. However, after his father had explained his malady, I took him in hand, demonstrating the force of autosuggestion by means of a few simple experiments such as I usually make during my lectures. For instance, I made him clasp his hands tightly, and then showed him that he could not unclasp them while thinking and saying, I cannot, I cannot. The boy was convinced. He went away full of confidence, promising to recite my formula regularly and to practice conscientiously the principles of autosuggestion. I saw him a few weeks afterward. There was already a considerable change. He could walk better, his breathing was easier, but he was still in a pitiful condition. The lad persevered, however, and he did indeed get better and better every day. And when I heard of him next, he was playing football. He was exempted from military service during the war, for medical examination showed him to be still suffering from his heart trouble, although to all intents and purposes he was a well-grown, muscular young man, which proves that symptoms can always be relieved by autosuggestion, even when the disease itself is incurable. Diabetes. Take diabetes. According to certain modern authorities, this affection may sometimes have its origin in nervous trouble. Generally, of course, it is organic. In any case, I have known it frequently to yield to autosuggestion practiced with perseverance. Recently, a patient succeeded in reducing the amount of sugar from 80 grams to 59 in less than a month. while several painful symptoms disappeared. Tuberculosis may be helped. Without venturing to declare that tuberculosis can be cured by autosuggestion, I do say that in many cases it can be fought successfully. By the practice of autosuggestion, the resistance of the organism is strengthened, and the patient aids nature's own tendency to react against disease. This is true indeed in all cases of general debility. I know a lady of 60 who had been ailing for the best part of her life, and who, when she came to me first, believed she was near death. She weighed barely 98 pounds. Autosuggestion transformed her. The idea of health implanted in her subconscious gave her self-confidence unknown to her previously. Her health improved to such an extent that she recovered from an attack of pulmonary congestion, which her doctor believed she could not possibly resist. And she has increased her weight by 26 pounds. Sciatica, gastric troubles, constipation, asthma, and headaches readily helped. Sciatica, gastric troubles, constipation, asthma, and headaches readily give way to autosuggestion. There is a man who had suffered from headaches for 30 years, taking aspirin and similar drugs regularly on certain days of the week. Notice the power of suggestion. He was convinced he would have a headache on such and such a day, and he did have one. Now he has set his mind working along other lines and has cured himself of his chronic headaches. I also know a man who suffered from sciatica, and who, according to a letter which he wrote the other day, has had practically no pain since the day he came to hear me explain the practice of autosuggestion. And a young woman who now thinks nothing of walking 8 miles, although by her doctor's orders she had considered herself an invalid for many years, scarcely daring to stir from her bed or her sofa. Wasted tissue may be repaired. Astonishing as these results may appear, they are perfectly logical and natural, since it has been demonstrated that in certain conditions, wasted tissue may be repaired by the exercise of autosuggestion. Women may hold and enhance their beauty. And now, here is a word of comfort for my fair readers who are fearful, and how many are not, of losing their good looks. Of course, you are right to want to remain young and fresh and good-looking, and you can do so if you only realize that you possess the secret yourselves. It is that little fairy who dwells in your subconscious and who asks nothing better than to smooth away those impertinent wrinkles, to put firm cushions of healthy flesh under sagging cheeks, or restore the laughing sparkle to dulled eyes. Yes, just train your imagination to visualize your face or body as you would like it to be, and you will have a very good chance of seeing them approach pretty near your ideal. Mind. I don't tell you that you can change the color of your eyes or hair or modify the shape of your chin or nose. We must always keep to the materially possible. But you can really improve your appearance and ward off the attacks of age and fatigue. Fatigue, by the way, ought not to be possible if you practiced autosuggestion. It is so largely a matter of imagination. Suppose you have a task to perform. If you think to yourself beforehand, this is going to be difficult and tiring, it surely will be so, and you will yawn over it and feel quite tired and bored. But if you're in a different frame of mind and say, this is going to be easy, I shall enjoy doing it, then you will not feel the slightest trace of fatigue. The best way of making a hard job easy is to buckle down and do it. One must observe the ordinary rules of health. It goes without saying that the practice of autosuggestion will not dispense one from the observance of the ordinary rules of health and hygiene. Remember, we are using the forces of nature, so it would be silly to attempt to fight them at the same time. Lead a rational life. Do not overeat. Masticate your food thoroughly. Take sufficient exercise. Avoid excesses. They are nature's laws. Their observance, combined with the knowledge of the all-powerful effects of autosuggestion, will keep you in good physical and moral health, and enable you to combat successfully any of the ills to which the human body is heir through tradition and heredity. The doctor, a necessity. Let me add most emphatically that I do not advise you to dispense with a doctor's services. Obviously, there are many cases in which his advice and medicine and care are absolutely indispensable. And always a doctor's presence and prestige and cheering words are helpful to the patient, especially if he also takes advantage of the wonderful instrument at his disposition and accompanies his prescription with the proper suggestions. The results will be attained with much greater rapidity. I want both patients and doctors to understand that autosuggestion is a most formidable weapon against disease.